Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to the City Council. Today is Thursday, November 1st, 2012. Good afternoon, Carla. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm fine. Thank you.
Did you have a good Halloween?
It was pretty nice, yes.
Did you have lots of trick-or-treaters?
I didn't go home till late.
You didn't get home till late?
Yeah.
Oh.
Missed them all.
Can you please read the item?
I take a roll call. Leonard?
Oh, roll first, sorry.
Fritz?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Saltzman? Adams?
Here. Quorum is present. We shall proceed. Carla, would you please read the title to the time certain?
Item 1232, authorize the mayor to execute an agreement with the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and the United States Attorney for the District of Oregon regarding changes to policies and procedures in and oversight of the Portland Police Bureau.
Could I have the folks that will be doing the initial speaking from staff come forward? We've got Jim Van Dyke, Clay Neal. Who else? Clay? And Chief of Police, Mike Reese. I'm going to make a few introductory comments. Testimony is welcome, and please sign up on the sign-in sheet. We'll be going in the order that folks signed up. Local law requires you to just give us your first and last name, that's all, and to also disclose if you're authorized to speak on behalf of a business or a group as their lobbyist. Other than that, we'll have 3 minutes to count down. And this is a first reading, which means no vote is taken today. We're just accepting testimony today. So my introduction. In February 2010, Commissioner Dan Saltzman and I stood with community leaders to request an investigation by the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division to review the Portland Police Bureau for bias, regardless of whether or not it was intentional, unconscious, or institutional. At the conclusion of that initial investigation, the United States found, quote, insufficient evidence to pursue federal criminal civil rights charges against Portland Police Bureaus involved at that point, including the fatal shooting of Aaron Campbell. However, days later, they announced a federal investigation into the Portland police officers' use of force to examine whether there is a pattern of practice of excessive force used by Portland police officers, particularly against those perceived to be or living with mental illness. When the Department of Justice announced its investigation, I said that I welcomed the inquiry and noted that we had not even asked, noted that we were looking for best practices and that we are humble in the knowledge that we don't have all of the issues related to the best possible policing and community policing figured out. As police commissioner with Chief Mike Reese, we maintained when we took over and sought to reinforce in the Bureau a culture of continuous improvement. And we have sought to be both tough on implementing the policies that do exist, the standards of conduct that do exist, but also to provide police officers and the public, police officers, more training and more equipment and budget support, and to offer citizens the ability to have more access to the way that those things are done. Last week we had the initial kickoff of the training facility. It was 167 years ago that the city employed its first police officer, and last week was the first time the city government, city council, provided the police bureau a comprehensive in-city training facility. We've also spared the budget. The city council has spared the police bureau budget from cuts to sworn personnel, recognizing that compared to other cities, we have a lean number of officers that we rely on to protect and serve our community. Knowing that a key part of this effort to improve trust and to improve positive relationships with all Portlanders, but especially Portlanders of color, we've worked hard over the past 2.5 years and to recruit some of the most diverse groups of applicants for the Police Bureau than than ever before. And we have worked hard with existing efforts, with the existing use of force policy that is tougher, more restrictive than the national use of force policy, to make sure that our use of force has decreased. It has decreased, and we want it to decrease more. The vast majority of Portland police officers are hard-working men and women who go well above what they are paid to do. And it is with those folks in mind that we are considering the wider context for the issue at hand today. We know that the issue of folks suffering from mental health or being perceived to suffer from mental health, including addictions, is the result of many things. The recession, cuts to government agencies, cuts to nonprofits, and that Portland police officers and 911 operators and firefighters and first responders through AMR are interacting with people with behavioral challenges, behavioral issues, mental health issues, addiction issues more than ever. But with this agreement, two important things happen. Regardless of whether or not things get better in terms of services, and under this agreement, there's a push to make sure that there are more services and more complete services. But regardless, the City of Portland Bureau of Police has embraced its role of being part of the treatment and care of folks that are suffering from mental illness and addictions. And in turn, because of the provisions of this document that note healthcare reform being led by Governor John Kitzhaber and by President Barack Obama, this also embraces and fast-tracks healthcare reform so that those people that are suffering from mental illness and addiction will have access to more services locally. This agreement covers, it adds to our existing policies new provisions related to the use of force, making them more restrictive, and that's appropriate. It requires new and better training, and we embrace that. We also embrace the Memphis model, so that new unit within the Portland Police Bureau will oversee and organize how police officers interact with people experiencing mental illness, getting them to treatment as much as we possibly can, rather to jail. And it enhances civilian oversight of the Bureau with the creation of 3 citizen oversight groups. Although the federal government found no constitutional violations in terms of improved or racism, institutional racism, this report embraces the fact that we need to improve, the Portland Police Bureau, I as Police Commissioner, we need to improve the trust that we hold with the community at large, and especially Portlanders of color and Portlanders that are suffering from mental illness. That requires that we speed up our investigations, and the majority of new positions created under this agreement are intended to either do that or to provide for independent monitoring of this agreement. We must build trust if we're going to make headway on community policing, if we're going to make headway on dealing with the most vulnerable amongst us. This also takes the cooperation of other agencies, not only at the CCO level, but in order for this to work, it will take more cooperation from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and from other peacekeeping and law enforcement agencies. The oversight of this happens with a committee of 15 people. 2 other committees are established, the Training Advisory Council to provide for citizen oversight of training, and then there is another citizen oversight committee to oversee the new mental health unit within the Portland Police Bureau. We on City Council can each make an appointment one each, to the overarching oversight board, and I would encourage my council to make those appointments with an eye to putting people on the oversight board that have experience with mental health issues, advocacy, folks that have public policy or on-the-ground experience in dealing and helping those suffering from mental illness to recover. This will make an improved Portland Police Bureau, and a police bureau that is even closer in line with the city values that we share. Now I'd like to introduce Jim Van Dyke, the city attorney, who will begin the presentation in more detail of what's contained in this agreement. Mr. Van Dyke.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. What I'm going to do today is just provide a bare bones outline of what the agreement contains. Following that, we'll have a number of people available to go through various sections of the agreement and provide a little bit more detail about each of these sections, which will include the chief, Clay Neal, and members of my staff. As you know, earlier this year, the United States Department of Justice found that most uses of force by the Portland Police Bureau were within constitutional limits, but it did find reasonable cause to believe there was a pattern or practice of unnecessary or excessive force in certain encounters between police officers and persons who had or were perceived to have had mental illness. Following that finding, my office, together with the Police Bureau, with other members of the city, sat down and engaged in lengthy negotiations with representatives from the United States Department of Justice, both from Washington, D.C. and from the local office here, and put in many hours trying to reach the agreement that you have before you. It concerns or touches on approximately 9 topics. It concerns changes to the Police Bureau's use of force policies. It concerns changes to training in the Portland Police Bureau. It concerns community-based mental health services. It concerns crisis intervention and how the Police Bureau will address and deal with folks in the community who are experiencing a mental health crisis. It will change how the Police Bureau saves and coordinates its data in its employee information system. It provides new measures regarding officer accountability, including a reduction in the time frame in which administrative investigations occur. It lays out a plan for community outreach, and it lays out a path for implementation of the agreement and enforcement of the agreement. And I'll be back up later to talk about both implementation and enforcement of the agreement after folks talk about the details of this. I do want to add a couple of pro forma technical notes. You will notice in the agreement that there's a denial of wrongdoing. This is a common part of any settlement agreement. It's included in every settlement agreement that the city executes and that other parties executes. The primary reason for that is to make sure there aren't unintended legal consequences for the city in this agreement. Nothing more should be read into it than that. If you were to sue your doctor for malpractice and the insurance company paid you $10 million, they would put a provision in the agreement saying they hadn't done anything wrong. There's another provision of the agreement that talks about not referencing the previous communications or the negotiations that went on between the city and Department of Justice. This is typical for contract interpretation. If this matter has to go before the court and decide whether the city has lived up to this agreement, we're going to look to the words of this agreement, not to what was subjectively intended or might have been said in conversations between parties. The only time that might come into play is if there's a portion of the agreement that's not clear. Finally, we have been reminded by the Department of Justice that we are not to talk about the specifics of those negotiations. We can talk about what's here and what's before council and what's not before council, but we have been admonished by them not to discuss the confidential communications during those negotiations. Thank you.
Chief Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. A little over a year ago, I sat down with Assistant Attorney General Tom Perez when he arrived in Portland to let us know that the Department of Justice was conducting an investigation into the Portland Police Bureau. We had breakfast together and discussed their investigation, proposals, the strategies, and where he thought community policing should be in the United States. And I felt like we were kindred spirits, and we saw the future of policing in Portland and in this country in the same fashion. Certainly with this agreement, there is no daylight between what the Department of Justice is asking us to do and what we want to do as a police bureau. I think it is a reflection of the changing nature of police work in that departments across the United States are dealing more and more with issues around homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health, and less with major crime issues. Crime is down. We have one of the safest cities in the United States, and our officers are engaged much more in these very difficult problems like homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health. As we proceed forward, it's important for us to have new partnerships. And we have been in that mindset for a while. We have vibrant relationships with VOA, with Cascadia, with Join, Central City Concern, Transition Projects. And I've been talking to our officers since I became chief that we have to have, as we move forward, relationships with our social service partners that are better than our relationship with the jail. And if we're going to be successful in this new dynamic in police work, these are the partners that we're going to need. It's also clear to me that we're going to have to be partners with the part of the healthcare system, not just the criminal justice system. And you'll see in the agreement specific to that ties between us and the new health organizations that are being set up. And the realization, I applaud the mayor for bringing CEOs of our hospital systems to the table and our partners at Multnomah County to the table as we discuss this about how do we proceed forward, knowing that we as a bureau can do better and we as a community can also do better. So you'll see in the agreement new relationships, new subcommittees and work groups, and a commitment from the Police Bureau, the city, and Multnomah County to work on these very difficult issues so that our teams and our processes are interrelated, that we're sharing information, and that we're doing everything we can to line up resources in one path. In terms of the crisis intervention, you'll see in the agreement that we are adopting a new model. We are creating an addictions and behavioral health unit. I think this is a step forward in something that we've been working towards for quite a while. The service coordination team model is something that we started many years ago, has been highly successful in bringing law enforcement and social service partners together to work on people who are cycling through the criminal justice system because of their drug addiction. A lot of those folks that we're dealing with now also have mental health issues. That model is very successful, and we see with the Addictions and Behavioral Health Unit a path forward to work in the same fashion with people in mental health crisis. We have had the Mobile Crisis Unit, and that partnership with Project Respond has been incredibly valuable as well. The information sharing between our organizations and the training that it provides our officers. So you'll see in the agreement expanding that model so that we have one mobile crisis unit in every precinct. The crisis intervention training many years ago, it was a community-wide effort that Mayor Potter put together, and the community looked at our training at that point and decided that it was best for the Portland Police Bureau to train all members of the organization in crisis intervention. I concur with that recommendation. It is a core competency for police officers in Portland, Oregon to have those skills. But it's also clear from conversations that I've had recently with members of the community that they want to have, when the opportunity is there, to have an officer who has an advocacy and a passion for working with people in crisis, to have that officer receive enhanced training and to be available to respond quickly to these calls. And so we are reconstituting our crisis intervention team. We have already put out a job announcement. This will be a detached position within the Portland Police Bureau for patrol officers to receive enhanced training. And then when there is a call involving someone in crisis, that officer would be dispatched along with the primary district officer. Those are some of the larger pieces to what we're doing around crisis intervention, and I'll turn it over to Clay if he wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, the chief covered most of the points. I just want to point back to the...
For the record, your name is?
My name is Clay Neal. I'm the Mayor's Director of Public Safety and Peacekeeping. The chief covered most of the points, as I said, but I want to point back to the future collaboration that the agreement requires of the city with other agencies and community groups. It is an expectation in this agreement that the city pursues partnership with regional coordinated care organizations that are implementing healthcare transformation locally, and I think that's a step in the right direction, given that we haven't traditionally been at that table because the city has not been traditionally thought of as a medical provider. It's been clear through the conversations that we've been having in the mayor's office for the past year, but through Commissioner Fritz and other members of the city for many years with Safer PDX and through the Bazelon Project, that the city is a provider of medical services through our first responders and through 911. And so to have that opportunity in agreement with the established coordinated care organizations who have agreed to this to allow the city to sit at the table is remarkable, and I'm looking forward to the city's participation in that conversation.
And then, do we have a budget?
Yeah, we'll continue with some of the other provisions of the agreement as well. If Dave Warble.
And who else? Is Dave going to do the budget?
Dave will talk about use of force with the chief, as well as Stephanie Harper will join for employee information systems and accountability.
Okay.
And then we'll have the auditor and Mary Beth Baptista as well.
And then the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mayor, I'm David Wobrel. I work for the City Attorney. I've been asked to give you a framework to help you organize your review of the force policy component of the agreement.
Mr. Mike.
Can everyone hear?
Thank you.
There are four components to this, to the force policy part of the agreement. One is an augmentation of the Portland Police Bureau's force policy. This will involve eventually result in changes to the force policy and the taser policy. There is an increase in supervisor review of force events required by the agreement. That's in process in the Portland Police Bureau currently, in fact, almost completed. There's a requirement there be a collection of data so that we can understand, we meaning the Portland Police Bureau, the community, the council, can understand more accurately how officers are performing in confrontations and how they're using force to resolve situations. And then finally, there's some requirements that the city use that data to feed back to systems and reform systems. There was substantial agreement with DOJ early on in the negotiations about the purpose of talking about force policy. And there's no question in the city's mind and DOJ's mind that the modern police agency should manage toward using force at lower levels as little as possible to resolve confrontations. The trick is for everyone to get there in a practical way so that we create management rules that a supervisor or chief of police can actually enforce and that guide officers in a practical way to their conduct on the street. Portland, for some years, has had a requirement that officers perform at a higher level than the constitutional level. That's reflected in, it's been reflected in policy since 2007. Portland has, the commissioner and the chief of police have been trying to create even more elevated practical standards. And the interaction with DOJ was a catalyst for us coming up with better, new, and very progressive standards. You will see the force, let's see here. The policy language in the agreement starts on page 14. In that language, you'll see a restatement of Portland's current policy, which is the Graham standard, the constitutional standard that officers use reasonable force, as well as Portland's current standard that over time officers do better than, on average, do better than the Graham standard. You'll also see in the policy, and I hope to find the site for you, a new standard that requires officers, and this is the first time it's been, our implementation of it will be the first implementation around the country, that officers, when they make decisions, when they choose between the reasonable options at a scene, officers will be required to reasonably calculate that that's the option that will resolve the situation with the lowest level of force or no force at all. This is, as I say, a progressive new standard. We think that it'll work, and we think it'll benefit the citizens of Portland greatly. In the TASER policy,
Dave, if I could, I want to make it really clear that this is a conversation that we've been having internally for many years. And as Dave said, the force policy changed substantially in 2007 to require officers to perform at a higher level than the constitutional standard. And it also, I think, is important to note that the work that we've been doing in both training and policy development has paid off. Our force use is down 35% over the last 4 years, and officers rely on force very little in their day-to-day work.
So I wonder if you could help us understand that concept better by giving an example, whether it's a real-life example or a hypothetical of a level of force that may be allowed under the Constitution and one then a level of force that would meet your new expectation and the gap between what the Constitution may allow and this new force policy will only allow.
I could talk conceptually about that, and the chief with practical experience can probably give you a specific scenario. When an officer gets to a situation in which people are unwilling to comply, a person's unwilling to comply, there's many, many possibilities that can spin out because there's so many actors. Perhaps the person's going to respond to presence, maybe not, perhaps to persuasion, maybe not, perhaps to various levels of force. It can be reasonable in a situation to think that several different uses of force are necessary. Perhaps hands-on control might resolve it if you can approach the person, gain control that way. Perhaps that won't work. It'll be reasonable to consider TASER, to take control from a distance. Perhaps those two alternatives are not unreasonable. What we're asking officers to do with the new standard is to think hard about which is better, which is really to actually make a distinction not between unreasonable and reasonable force, but between different reasonable options. Now, in hindsight, we will probably never be able to determine what the least amount of force might have been to resolve it.
But that was going to be my next question. So
that's the discipline problem.
Exactly. In the aftermath of an incident from this point on, given you've adopted a written standard, what do you perceive the management's reaction would be to an officer who you have determined didn't use the least amount of force available?
The test will not be least amount of force. The test, because you can't determine that. That's been the conundrum for law enforcement all over the country. How do you as a manager go to arbitration, say, and prove how that would have turned out with a different set of actions by all the parties involved? You can, however, we believe, ask the officer to articulate completely their thinking and evaluate the quality of the choices that are made, given the information available to the officer. That's been the kind of holy grail of force thinking and policy.
And compare that to their actions.
Pardon?
And be able to compare that to their actions.
Exactly so.
But you're saying that even if Chief Reese would have determined to use a lesser amount of force in the same situation, if an officer in the aftermath of an incident, explains what his or her reasoning was to use the level of force they did, that may countermand what the chief or other supervisors may actually conclude a better level of force would have been?
The rule's quite specific in that the officer's thinking needs to be in pursuit of the goal of using lower levels of force or avoiding force altogether. So that's a reasonable expectation of your employees, and hopefully we expect a standard you can objectively judge after the fact, whether they were actually trying to get there. These
Is
are
there
very
any
difficult
department in the
incidents.
country that does that, that we know of, that actually
We are at the forefront
is the forefront?
in this model. And if I were to go to my compatriots at major city chiefs and ask them, would you like me to come show you how we can reduce force in your department 35% over the next 4 years, I'd have a lot of takers, because this is really unique. And again, what we're looking at is not specific incidents. We judge those on the Graham standard, but over the course of a person's career, as you develop experience and you develop skills, we want to see you working towards lower levels of force. And as part of the agreement, you'll see training around de-escalation strategies, which we've been doing. That'll be part of the critique that sergeants do after force encounters. Did you think about using de-escalation? Was it appropriate? If not, why not? And that will be part of that ongoing training and critique process.
I could point you to paragraph 67 sub C, which has one of the formulations of the new standard. And the draft force policy, which has been circulated, has the new standard in it as well for your study.
It just to for those that don't necessarily have the luxury of following all the details over years, but this adds on top of the existing expectation that the chief said that over time we expect to see more skill employed at de-escalation, at being able to, at officers being able to use less force over time. And so the fact that our officers will be judged on every situation, but that we keep track of their history in the use of force or less use of force or no force, that too is unique among American police departments.
So I'm sorry to just be so focused on this, but it seems to me this is kind of the nut of the agreement, and Section D of paragraph 67, kind of sums up what the result will be. Unreasonable uses of force may result in disciplinary action. But it seems to me beyond, and correct me if I'm wrong, beyond interviewing an officer in the aftermath of an incident, understanding his or her reasoning, that in at least Portland's academy, not the state's academy, but Portland's academy for new recruits, somehow this concept needs to be integrated and become an integral part, a new part of the training academy for new police officers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
One of the agreement's requirements is that we train on the requirements of the agreement, and that will begin at in-service, at the next session of in-service. I will say that Portland has done a good job of having its trainers change how they present, how they judge decision-making. In the past, trainers might have said that's an acceptable, reasonable response when an officer proposes something in a training scenario. They don't do that anymore. Now they talk about the best choice. And that's a significant change. They're ready for this. This won't be news to them. It'll be incorporated quite easily, and I think there'll be a very good training over the course of the winter.
Great, thank you.
If I could also just connect the dot back to the council's direction to pursue evaluations, regular evaluations of officers, which right now is making its way. Our effort to employ that in the Portland Police Bureau is making its way through the collective bargaining process. It also, this gives us an opportunity for, in addition to the counseling that happens after any use of force, is also incorporated not only in training, but also in the evaluation of officers.
Great, thank you.
The force policy also, or the agreement in paragraph 66 through 68, has some requirements for the TASER policy, which includes a heightened threshold for application of TASER. There have been a couple of schools of thought around the country. Portland's been firmly in the middle of one of those schools of thought. We're all coming together in the middle. The agreement identifies the middle, and we'll be solidly in the middle of the consensus around the country. Also restrictions on the use of TASER for pain compliance. TASER was originally purchased by law enforcement as a control tool. We're getting back to that principle. The data collection is extensive. Supervisors are going to be more involved in the review of use of force, paragraph 70 through 73. Give you a picture of what currently is going on in the Portland Police Bureau. When DOJ arrived in town, they impressed upon the Portland Police Bureau the need for supervisor involvement as reviewers in uses of force less serious than they were reviewing. Our after-action level was higher than many bureaus in the United States. And the threshold now is at uses of force more serious than unresisted handcuffing. The system they've set up is quite thorough. It's detailed. You'll see many of the details in those paragraphs 70 to 73. It's working. It appears to be working very well. I'm seeing very thorough evaluations with rich detail. And supervisors are getting witness statements and evidence from these scenes. It appears we're documenting them very well. So the future looks good there.
There's also significant new expectations, protocols, and it'll be institutionalized on the quality and completeness of sergeants or supervisors' reports of these after-action use of forces.
The city has agreed with DOJ that everyone in the chain of review should be accountable for the thoroughness and completeness and effectiveness of these reviews, all the way up to the commander and the chief. That's explicit in the agreement and will be explicit in Portland Police Bureau policy. Data collection is important to knowing if these reforms are working. You look at paragraph 70 through 78, and you'll see the various data collection efforts, quite thorough. It's going to take a buildup in the Police Bureau of data collection capability. They're starting that process now, and we look forward to having more information about these events. Use of the data. You can see requirements in paragraph 80 that there must be an annual update to the training division's training plan. And in paragraph 81, there must be studies by the training division of the effectiveness of the training. That's a difficult and complex issue. Everybody wants to know how well training is doing and, of course, wants to have effective training. So they're going to get after that. And
let me be clear to clarify. It will be the exception to the rule, the rare exception to the rule, for example, that the Training Advisory Council's meetings will be an executive session, that work of the Training Advisory Council will be public meetings.
I expect it would be very rare that they would discuss a subject that is so sensitive and so important to public safety to keep confidential that a meeting would be closed. The idea is to get all this information out in front of the public and make public decisions about how best to proceed.
And I think that's reflected in what we've been doing the last 2 years with having Dave and precinct commanders talk to community groups about our use of force policies and getting feedback from those community groups. Training will be critical for us. As Dave said, we have in-service coming up, and we will be training to this agreement and to the new policy changes. There are mechanisms in place that we will be required to use more scenario-based training and role-playing, specific to interactions with persons who have a perceived mental illness. Obviously, we're going to have to train supervisors and managers to the new requirements in evaluating performance and evaluating use of force.
So now we're going to hear from Stephanie Harper about the data collection system and the early warning opportunities for police officers or others that show signs of not adhering to this agreement.
Good afternoon.
Could you press that button? That's a manual one. Yep.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Harper. I'm a deputy city attorney with the city attorney's office. The next couple of sections of the agreement cover really our overall management of our workforce. And the first, you have to remember, the Department of Justice's investigation really was about systems, not individual cases. And so these two portions of the agreement relate to how do we enhance and improve those systems. So currently the Portland Police Bureau has what is called an employee information system, and that system actually collects information. I think of it as it's the center of a wheel, and there's a number of spokes coming out from the center of that wheel, and it goes out and grabs data in other databases that the Portland Police Bureau has that talk about what officers are doing on a day-to-day basis. So that EIS system collects that data and brings it all into one place where it can be reviewed, and the employee as well as their chain of command can actually see what is going on with this particular officer, what kind of work are they doing, how many arrests are they making, how many incidents of forces have occurred. All of that data gets collected in the system and then is reviewed, can be reviewed both by the chain of command as well as within the professional standards division. There is a sergeant who's assigned full time to actually review EIS case threshold triggers that occur, which send up an alert when certain thresholds get met. So what this agreement provides for is continuation of the thresholds that have already been in place and working. The system's been up and running fully for about a year, I think now. So if an officer has used force in 20% of their arrests in the past 6 months, it'll throw up a flag. Or if they've used force 3 times more than the average number of uses of force compared to other officers on the same shift, those flags will go up and it triggers a review by the EIS administrator, who then pulls all that underlying data and reviews it and assesses it to determine, do we have a case here where we should really do some intervention on the front end and talk with the officer, or is everything been appropriately handled in this case? And then they'll identify opportunities for counseling if need be and provide that information back to the chain of command so they can take appropriate supervisory steps early on. The idea is you're trying to, folks should sort of self-manage their behavior and so they can see their productivity levels and then also see possibly where they may be falling out of line, and we can bring them easily back into the line. In addition, we're going to add an additional threshold under the agreement that will provide another trigger if an officer has 3 uses of force in a 1-month period of time. So again, there are multiple steps built into the system where within the chain of command, once a case goes out for review, there's a number of people who make those decisions. That information comes back into the system to show that review's been completed and whatever action's been taken that has occurred. And then also under the agreement, we'll identify and train a second person to actually do that EIS administration work. In addition, besides those individual bases, what the agreement will provide is enhanced use of that system by supervisors and managers by actually looking on not just an individual officer level, but a unit level, and then looking on a group-wide level under particular supervisors and folks within their chain. Any questions about that section?
Currently, we're not doing that, right?
Currently, I think that is actually happening to some extent, but what we're trying to do is actually make that a formal process where it happens on a regular and routine basis.
We're going to be implementing thresholds at unit levels as well as officer levels. And then one of the things that came out of the Department of Justice review of our employee information system, they had an expert come in and review it and said that the system was actually the best that he had ever reviewed and was very complimentary of the work we had done. So I want to really highlight the fact that the folks that have put this together have been very thoughtful in their application of it.
But we're going to use it more.
Yes.
All right. You want to talk about officer investigations and speeding that up, accountability?
Sure. In terms of officer accountability, as all of you know, and anybody knows, if you're in charge of leading groups of people, there's a variety of ways at which we assure accountability. And one of those ways, of course, is if complaints are filed or the Portland Police Bureau identifies issues that need to be investigated, then we trigger a complaint or an investigation process. Currently, all of that is initiated through the Independent Police Review Division in terms of the tracking. And so the requirement under this agreement is that all of those administrative investigations, excluding the actual disciplinary process, should discipline be recommended and taken, will occur within 180 days. Which is a reduction, and we will also, in the course of that, will actually include, the entire investigation process as well as the Citizen Review Committee appeal process, which I'm sure Director Baptista can talk about in more extensive detail. That's really the main component of that. There's some exceptions. For example, if we have a concurrent criminal investigation, that timeline may expand out just because of the needs of that particular case.
All right.
And the other piece to that is obviously we have a meeting coming close to those timelines. So this is going to be a very aggressive timeline for us. We're committed to it. We're adding more investigators, civilian investigators, to the Professional Standards Division, as well as to IPR, so that we can achieve these results.
All right. Now ask that our independently elected auditor, Griffin Valet, please join us with a member of her team. Welcome back.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Barely hear you. Is there something wrong with that mic? All right.
Hello. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor Adams and City Council members. LaVon Griffin Valet, Portland City Auditor. I want to just make a few brief comments before turning the presentation over to Mary Beth Baptista, Director of the Independent Police Review Division in my office, and so she can discuss the more pertinent details. So since 2009, the Independent Police Review Division, better known as IPR, has become a more proactive civilian oversight agency, particularly as a result of the various city code changes enacted by City Council in 2010 and 2012. Pending Council's approval, the settlement agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice will enhance those improvements and create even stronger accountability measures. The most important of the measures, from my perspective, addressed in the agreement is timeliness of investigations. Investigations will need to be wrapped up in 180 days. The goal of this particular piece is to prevent years-long investigations that end up eroding public trust and system accountability. Also, now there will be guidelines to bring about consistency and police officer discipline. This will help ensure that discipline decisions are clear to officers and meted out fairly. The agreement will also require IPR investigators to essentially conduct more thorough investigations in half the amount of time, and as a result, requires more investigators in IPR. I welcome that, and I want Council and the public to know that I am committed to greater diversity on our team. And I want to reiterate that I am also very committed to hiring at least one, more than one, hopefully, a new investigator with a background and experience in the field of mental health. Thank you, and I'll turn this over to Mary Beth at this point.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Beth Baptista. I'm the Director of the Auditor's Independent Police Review Division, IPR. Some of the specific provisions in this agreement that can help get the investigations under 180 days is what I'm here to highlight today. First, if you look at page 42 on paragraph 121, it now calls for concurrent investigations of both criminal matters and administrative matters. This will especially assist speeding up investigations in officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths. On page 43, paragraph 127, the DOJ calls for us to develop a plan, IPR and the Police Bureau, to develop a plan to enable meaningful independent investigations done by IPR. There is also provision, as the auditor mentioned, that the Bureau has been directed to develop a discipline guide, a discipline matrix. And our hope is that with more consistent discipline and a more consistent system and a matrix that lays it out, that discipline decisions will be able to be made more consistently, but also more quickly and more efficiently. The other provisions that will allow the investigations to be done within 180 days, this will include the Citizen Review Committee appeals. Right now, the Citizen Review Committee appeals can last up to 60, sometimes 90 days. Under the DOJ's agreement, it will now have to be completed within 21 days. And I understand that that is a significant reduction, but the agreement also provides for an increase in membership on the Citizen Review Committee from 9 to 11. But they called for the quorum to be the same, understanding that not all 11, a quorum of 11 to increase the quorum would make it difficult for the complete committee to get the appeals done within 21 days. And so they've made the provisions to have an increased membership. And just as a side note, I understand that the mayor has called on the commissioners to make sure that they come forward with recommendations for the new oversight committee. But I also want to remind the commissioners that you may also make recommendations to the Citizen Review Committee. We've only actually had the mayor do that in recent years, and I think it's very important, especially now that we're expanding the membership to 11, I think it's very important that the commissioners look at the dedicated people within their bureaus and the people that they work with and encourage them to also participate on the Citizen Review Committee, because we will, with the increase in membership, we'll need your assistance too. The Citizen Review Committee members also have now been given the authority to be one of the 2 citizen members on the use of force review boards. Just as a reminder, certain uses of force that go through the performance review board, so if there's a recommendation of a sustained finding with discipline, a board is convened. On that board are voting members in use of force cases. It's the IPR director, the commander, the assistant chief, as well as 2 citizen members and 2 peer members. This agreement now makes a Citizen Review Committee member a member of that use of force review board. So they will actually get to, on a rotating basis, serve on this board, make findings, and make recommendations directly to the chief regarding discipline. And then, of course, there are provisions to enhance the transparency of the process with complaints. If you look at page 48, recommendations 137 through 139 require IPR to enhance our existing website, to enhance the ability for citizens to track their complaints, get more timely updates, and more information from their complaints. Our outreach coordinator, Irene Konev, is here, and she will be the person on my team that will be working to get community feedback on what kind of information they would like to see and the best way for them to get it. And we are excited about this provision and feel like that this will really enhance community trust.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate everyone's forbearance. This is a 74-page document, so we want to make sure that on the record we get the key highlights. So if we could have then Attorney Van Dyke talk about the community engagement aspect of the agreement, the various committees that are established. And while you're getting settled, I just want to reinforce that the use of force policy, a draft use of force policy and a draft use of taser policy, we're still taking public comments on. We've gotten a number of very good comments, and so that will remain open for at least another week and encourage everyone to give us their best thoughts on those draft policies. And we'll send out another email and Twitter and everything so you know where to go for those.
Thank you. Stephanie's going to take the lead on the community engagement portion.
Thank you. So the next section...
Can you move that mic over and reintroduce yourself?
Yes. Stephanie Harper, Deputy City Attorney with the City Attorney's Office. So a critical component of this agreement is, this is an agreement between the city and the federal government, but it obviously is an agreement with our community as well. And that is reflected starting on page 48 of the document. And so the oversight of this agreement has a number of multiple components to it. The one important component is the Community Oversight Advisory Board. That is a 20-member board. 15 are voting members, 5 are non-voting members. Of the 15 members, as the mayor mentioned in his introduction, each member of City Council would select one representative for the first 5 members. The next 5 members are the members of the Human Rights Commission, who currently serve as members on the CPRC Police Relations Committee, who have been doing work currently. And then the community, our community at large, will select 5 voting representatives directly from the community. And the agreement sets out a process by which those 5 community members will be selected. There is some criteria that's spelled out in the agreement, but we're looking obviously for a wide range and are asking, obviously we'll need City Council's work and the work of our community engagement bureaus to really provide broad outreach so that we can get a great pool of candidates to run for those 5 slots.
So that I described that process as outlined by the DOJ as similar to the Iowa caucuses process. It's open to any resident of the city.
Okay, so that board will be responsible for independently assessing the implementation of the agreement. So are the terms of the agreement being met? Making recommendations to both the city and the federal government on additional actions, working with the chief and police commissioner on strategies to improve community relations, providing community with information on the agreement and its implementation, and also significantly to contribute to the development of a PPB community engagement and outreach plan, which would be a significant component of the board's work. In addition, this board will be working with a community outreach and compliance liaison, a COCL. And that liaison will, within 60 days of the effective date of this agreement, we have to identify 3 candidates who have expertise in police practices, crisis intervention, and then community outreach. And those 3 candidates will come before the City Council publicly for consideration for selection of that community outreach and compliance officer. That person will be responsible for coordinating and organizing, this agreement and its enforcement in terms of working with the Portland Police Bureau's compliance officer that they will have to designate, working with the board, and then providing information to the U.S. Department of Justice, and then, if necessary, the court.
And is it envisioned that there would be an application process to identify the 3?
Yes.
Yeah, I had initial conversations with Anna Canwit and Christine Moody on coming up with a process for the council to consider and for public comment on. If I could have join us at the table, Bureau of Financial Planning Director Andrew Scott to talk a little bit about, or is it going to be Tess? Okay, Tess. Even more important. And this will be the last, and Tess will go over the budget. Do not have the, I want to get council passage of this document, but I'm actively working on funding sources, and we will come up with a funding source for this. But we don't have one identified at this very moment.
Hi, I'm Tess Jordan with Financial Planning Division. So our current estimate for the ongoing citywide annual cost of implementation of this agreement is at $5.4 million. The bulk of those costs will be in the Police Bureau, but there are also 4 additional bureaus that will be impacted. In terms of what is generating those costs, close to 40% of the costs are from moving ongoing but unfunded programs into our ongoing budget. So that includes the service coordination team contracts and program manager position. That's $1.9 million in itself. And then also 1 mental health professional that now supports the mobile crisis unit. That unit will be called Mobile Crisis Prevention Unit in the future. The remaining costs, 60%, or $3.4 million, are associated with new staff, programming, and associated overhead. So for this Mobile Crisis and Prevention Unit, that will be expanded to 3 mental health professionals. The cost of that expansion is about $300,000. There are an additional 22 FTE within the Police Bureau, the bulk of those within internal affairs, training, and the new Addictions and Behavioral Health Unit. And then elsewhere in the city, there are an additional 6 FTE that are anticipated, 3 in IPR, 1 in the city attorney's office, and 2 in the Office of Equity, which is thought of as a reasonable place to locate the community liaison position and a management analyst.
Does that 2 include the community liaison?
Yeah, it's that position and then a supporting management analyst.
And just to underscore, the person will be co-located in the Office of Equity, but work for and report to the entire City Council. But the co-location seemed like a good place, given the mission of the Office of Equity, and our hope is will help to lend their expertise, but that individual will work directly for the council.
Right. The salaries are all estimates at this point. In many cases, the exact classification has yet to be determined, including for some positions whether it will be a sworn or a non-sworn position. So that's how we get to the 5.4 for this year. Our estimate is right around $2 million, and that's assuming that hiring would begin January 1. That includes most all of the one-time costs and then a prorated share of ongoing salaries.
So just to maybe slice it, go back and ask you in a couple of different ways so people understand. Of the 32 FTE, how many would be sworn versus non-sworn?
So for Police Bureau, we're at 23. Total, we're at 29.
Non-sworn? Sworn,
Total city staff.
I'm asking sworn, non-sworn.
I think my impression is that we're at about 9 sworn. And then within the Police Bureau, we would have 14 non-sworn. I think there's still probably differences of opinion around the specifics of those numbers.
But the biggest single group to be hired would be the 10 folks in the professional standards division to be able to speed up and meet the 180-day deadline for the turnaround. And
so that
also
doubles investigators in that division. 2 of those would be sworn detectives. 3 would be non-sworn investigators.
Okay. And the addictions and behavioral unit, that's the a lieutenant and 5 civilians.
That's my impression.
All right. Then, unless there are comments on the budget? Questions on the budget?
Not on the budget.
Okay. Then let's get to, again, appreciate everyone's perseverance. The last thing is just how long are we under this agreement, Mr. Attorney, and how is success determined? Who decides whether we're successful or not? Could you move the mic closer to you?
Sure, Jim Van Dyke, City Attorney. Substantial compliance with this agreement is required by late 2017. The city may require, may request early termination if we feel like we've met all the targets before then. There is a dispute provision in the agreement. Obviously, the federal DOJ, we will be reporting many different aspects of the city's performance to them. If they do not believe that we are meeting our goals, they have the opportunity to notify us of that, and we can have discussions with them. We have a mediation process built into the agreement if we can't resolve that dispute informally. The new community outreach person, the COCL, also will be reporting to the Department of Justice about implementation and outreach and that sort of thing. There are a number of different people in here who will be providing reports that will be forwarded back to them. So
the compliance officer and community liaison that you referenced, they will be making the official report after consultation with the community board and others. They will be making the official report back to DOJ on a quarterly basis, and DOJ will decide whether or not we're meeting the...
That's correct. And I think most of the reports, I believe, if not all of the reports that are referenced in this agreement are public records and publicly available. I know that some portions of the agreement expressly call that out and others do not, but I believe it's the intent for all the agreements, all the reports in that to become publicly available.
Great. All right. Thank you both very much. We'll now turn...
I did want to ask
Yep.
Jim a question.
And then we go to public.
Typically, the council considers ordinances and attachments that are part of the ordinance by reference, and listen to testimony, and then may or may not make changes. In this case, this has been a negotiated agreement, the attachment A, as it's referenced in the ordinance. The ordinance specifically, if passed, authorizes the mayor to execute the agreement. Just myself, and I'm sure I'm probably speaking for the rest of the council, I've been contacted by at least 2 elected officials, a variety of community members, some organizations that want specific changes in the agreement. Can you help me understand? And I do read that in the ordinance it says that the agreement or a substantially similar form of the agreement is that which needs to be adopted. But how? First of all, if we make changes, how is that determined? And second, what if we make changes that are not substantially consistent with what attachment A is? Now explain the process to me.
Let me talk about the mechanics of that, because this was obviously a negotiated agreement, and we had to come into agreement in order to present it here to you today. If there are changes to be made in the agreement, what we're going to have to do is go back and reopen some negotiations with Department of Justice, tell them what the issues are that we need to discuss with them, and get their reaction to that. The reference to the substantial similarity in the ordinance language is typical of what we use to allow us to correct very minor portions, page numbers that were not, numbered correctly, paragraph numbers that we missed, very minor changes of language, but we keep it very restricted to that. So if the council has any kind of desire to change the agreement in any kind of real significant way, we're going to have to reopen that. And then what will happen after that is going to depend, I think, on what you folks decide, and I see 2 possible ways to go about that. One is you have some specific language you want us to take back and have DOJ agree on. And if they agree on it, then I think we're done, because you've approved the agreement as amended. If they don't agree with that language, then I think we're going to have to come back here and present their suggested alteration back to you. I guess one other way that you might do this is if you are not wedded to any particular language but have a concept, you could give authority to the mayor or to somebody to say, go out, accomplish this concept, and then if they accept that concept, you're further authorized to sign the agreement.
And I'm assuming in the negotiations they understood the process we would undergo to approve such an agreement, and they wouldn't be shocked, stunned, and appalled if we came back with something different than what was brought to us.
We did tell them that we would have to take this in front of City Council and get City Council approval, and they understood that.
Could I ask a follow-up question on that? Jim, as I look at the agreement, there are some things which seem to be clearly fundamental, and others where, reasonable people might agree or disagree about the number of people on a committee or the composition of the committee. Do you have a sense of having sat in the room in these negotiations as the difference between fundamental cornerstone points which have to be in the agreement and things that could be negotiated? Without describing them, do you have a sense of that line?
I think I have a general feel for that line. I mean, just to give you some very basic examples, I think the use of force proceedings, those are pretty fundamental. And coming back with pretty significant changes to the use of force, I would think, and I'm just guessing, that those would be difficult to do. There are some other portions of the agreement that probably they'd be more flexible on.
And in addition, again, you were in the room, and you've said at the outset that you've been admonished not to talk about the dynamics of the negotiation. But after this hearing, if it is the will of the council to explore some modifications, and you determine them not to be major modifications, but the kinds of things that we could engage our federal partners with,
how much time do you think it would take to have that discussion about their receptivity to our suggestions?
It depends on someone who led the negotiation. I think it depends on the nature of the change, but days, hopefully.
I agree with the mayor, but I'd also say to you that I was very impressed by the team back at Federal DOJ, their willingness to work very, very hard, very long hours, and that they were very responsive and moved everything through very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go to, yes.
Just to clarify for everyone, the mayor, the city attorney, and the chief of police were primarily involved in the negotiations with the Department of Justice, so the rest of the council may have some differences of opinion because we went to the table.
Goes without saying. All right, thank you all. First four.
This first four, please come on up, are Becky Strauss, Dr. Leroy Haynes, Tom Steenson, and Dan Handelman.
Welcome back. Ms. Strauss, would you like to begin?
Would. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Adams and Commissioners. Becky Strauss here on behalf of the ACLU of Oregon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. You have before you, or you will soon, I think you saw it in advance via email, a copy of my written testimony with a lot more detail, includes comments that we submitted on October 19th to the Bureau and the City and DOJ related to the draft policies on use of force. And both sets of those documents are also posted on our website for reference of others here in the room or watching. I'll take my time today to just highlight a couple elements. We are encouraged that many of our recommendations around the use of force that we submitted on the 19th were accepted by DOJ and the City and the Bureau and have become a part of the settlement agreement, including in particular the necessary standard that was alluded to a little bit by City Attorney Warborough earlier. Even if use of force in a particular case is lawful, it cannot and should not be used if it's not the least amount necessary to achieve that lawful objective. That standard should overlay all use of force decisions that an officer is making, and the agreement mandates as much, and we are supportive of that change. As you consider other amendments today, as was just being discussed, we request also that the agreement be revised to specify when taser use is authorized. Use of the taser should only be permitted when, one, the subject is displaying active aggression as defined by the current taser policy, and two, using that necessary standard, that the use of the taser is the least amount of force necessary in that instance. I think most generally, this today and the proceedings from the coming days is your opportunity for true community consensus around the use of force policy and to achieve true lasting change in the way that our public safety system engages with the community. I know that each of you on the council take that moment very seriously, and it's our grave concern that the agreement does not reflect that. Because there's no independent monitor in place with the authority of the court to revive this case if the city and the Bureau are not complying, we fear that there's not enough accountability to ensure that what is mandated will ever be actualized. But it has to be actualized. This needs to happen.
Without interrupting your train of thought,
of course.
I know the answer, but when you say independent monitor, you're talking about someone appointed by the court?
Absolutely, with authority of the court to go back and take this off the, what I believe is being called the kind of the passive docket, the inactive document, and pull it up for a judge to look at.
And what is the precedent in some other jurisdiction that you would want us to look at?
You know, I'd like to point to, I was just checking back with my office to find an example of where that's happened, and I don't have one right now, so I have to
Could you furnish us with
get
that
back
after
to
the
you.
hearing?
Yeah, absolutely.
But just since Commissioner Fish asked about that point, because I was going to follow up and ask anyway, why is not the U.S. Attorney's Office that independent monitor?
I think that at the highest level it is, but the benefit of the liaison role here that's being put in place that would be the perfect person to have authority of the court. They're there reviewing the documents, reporting to counsel, talking to the parties, looking at the use of force reports, engaging with the Bureau. They're here in Portland watching what's happening. And so that person is the best person to say substantial compliance is not happening, and it's not happening on the timelines that it should, and so it needs to go back to the court.
So just so that I'm clear, I'm not mistaken, because you and I had a discussion about this yesterday, and so I reviewed your comments and I reviewed the agreement. And I'm not mistaken in my interpretation of what I'm looking at here before me, that at any point the U.S. Attorney's Office could intercede and say, we don't believe you're living up to the agreement that we signed, and take independent action by filing a case in U.S. District Court. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You have another 30 seconds if you wanted to finish up your testimony.
I finished up. I really just want to reiterate that we're optimistic and hopeful that we can do this together. ACLU is committed to helping put this forward and committing to make this agreement happen. So thank you.
And I just want to offer my thanks. I haven't read everybody, so if I don't thank you for your comments, I will read them. But your comments on the use of force and the use of tasers were especially helpful. I want to thank you for them.
Thank you.
Doctor, welcome back.
Thank you very much. To our distinguished Mayor Sam Adams and illustrious members of the Portland City Council, I am the Reverend Dr. Leroy Haynes, chairperson of the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. The United Agreement before this august body is a milestone in labor and love and commitment and dedication of many people and organizations over several decades of struggle for justice and police reform within the Portland Police Bureau. It is far from a perfect agreement, and many others in our coalition will speak to that. It possesses many strengths, and it also possesses many weaknesses that maintain the status quo. Yet, I believe it moves our city to a new direction towards real accountability of the police officers who use excessive force and unnecessary deadly force. Hopefully, this will be a paradigm shift within the Portland Police Bureau that will transform the makeup of it, the policies, the training, the investigation, and the discipline of officers who violate the policy. It is the hope of many citizens in Portland that this agreement, when it is tweaked and corrected to a degree, will in turn lead our city and the police bureau towards a true comprehensive community policing plan, where the citizens of Portland are not thought of as adversaries, but as partners with the police department. I would like to thank this city council for answering the question of its citizens: who is in charge of the Portland Police Bureau? You have so answered that the Democratic elected representatives of this city are in charge of the Portland Police Bureau, and we thank you for answering that question. We thank Tom Perez of the U.S. Justice Department and Amanda Marshall, the U.S. Attorney and staff, and Chief Reese and his staff. Finally, we have a window of opportunity to make Portland Police Bureau a model for the nation. Let's get to work on it. Amen. Thank you.
And Doctor, thank you for, so in these proceedings you can put your thumbs up if you like something, thumbs down if you don't, because we like to try to maintain a sort of a fair field for anyone from any point of view to make their comments. But Doctor, I just wanted to underscore my thanks to you. You were there on February 2010 calling for the investigation, that and all your work on these issues over the years.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome.
My name is Tom Steenson. I both live in Portland and work here. I've been representing victims and families of victims for over 35 years in litigation against the City of Portland. I think I have a fairly substantial perspective on the issues related to police misconduct and what a good law enforcement agency would look like, in my estimation. I think the agreement is significantly flawed, despite countless hours of input, both individually on my account and as part of a group, and I know of many, many others who have similarly contributed. I see a great deal of what was proposed as what we believed to be best practices, referring to what Mr. Van Dyke earlier said you were looking for in the agreement. And many of the suggestions taken from what we think were good ideas and I think best practices have not been included, and in some cases haven't even been mentioned in a way where I think they've perhaps even been given any consideration. And frankly, I think all of us in the community are at a loss because the way the negotiations have worked, we're not a third party to the agreement. I mean, you talk about it being that way in a sense, but we're not. We were not involved in the negotiations. We don't know whether the Department of Justice said those are bad ideas or those are not best practices, and we're not going to advocate for those in the negotiation, or whether the city said, we're just not going to do that. So we don't know what happened to what we think was a lot of effort put into a lot of good ideas, and a lot of best practices have been rejected for one reason or another. And I urge you as an overview not to approve this agreement as it stands. I do not think it takes crossing T's and dotting I's. I think it's much more substantial reformation that needs to go into this, and I don't think it's going to be an easy process if you truly want to put in place an agreement that will serve not only the city but the community. And again, referring to Mr. Van Dyke, this is a contract that you're proposing, or that's being proposed that you sign. It's the words of the agreement that are going to control, again, Mr. Van Dyke's words. And I was prepared to go into many of my more specific comments about the flaws, and I could go on for hours, but the ones that I addressed in my written submission yesterday, and I don't have time to do that. But I think that you need to step back and look at this and give much more consideration to the input that you've received, maybe not directly as council members, but that the city and the Department of Justice has received from this community. And at this point, it has not been, in my estimation, fully considered nor accepted.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Handelman?
I'm wondering, since we're discussing 74 pages, if I might have 5 minutes today, Mr. Mayor?
Everyone's going to start with 3.
All right, thank you. Mayor Adams, City Council, and U.S. Department of Justice folks, I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and our group finds the DOJ agreement with the City of Portland doesn't go far enough and is much like bringing a plastic mallet to tap in a problem nail. While we applaud the potentially useful aspects of the agreement, we find the agreement does not go far enough and or is ambiguous enough for the city to avoid fulfilling the intent of the proposals to alleviate the pattern and practice of Portland Police Bureau excessive use of force. We're concerned that previous communications are not to be considered when interpreting this document. Many recommendations, as you've heard, made by the DOJ are not reflected in the agreement. We ask to see all communications between the city attorney, the PPA, the auditor, the IPR, and the DOJ, hoping they may shed light on why so many common sense community demands are not part of the agreement. This is of great concern because the agreement could last for as long as 5 years with no way for the community to directly intervene, since only the city and the DOJ are parties to the court. We hope this does not mean the DOJ expects the people of Portland to suffer through inadequate use of force training and policies or our Byzantine accountability system for that long. Our major concerns about the agreement include it doesn't call for terminating officers for egregious rights violations and even suggests that some excessive force will not result in discipline. It does not order the city to change provisions of existing collective bargaining contracts which are inhibiting effective investigations and disciplinary action. It keeps police review board meetings closed to the public, including the person involved in the incident, further frustrating attempts to integrate and make transparent the city's oversight system, and explicitly prohibits appeals to the Citizen Review Committee by people who survived police shootings or survivors of a death in custody victim about the findings regarding officer misconduct. Rather than create a solution for CRC when more investigation is asked for and the Bureau and IPR refuse, the agreement restricts CRC to making one request for more investigation. And it jettisons all mentions of race relations that were in the findings letter, including recommendations to build trust such as tracking all citizen contacts and creating a policy explaining when it is okay for officers to move from mere conversations to a stop. I do have positive things, but I'm going to skip them and just say that we feel our group has a lot to contribute, but our members would not serve on the community board to oversee the agreement because of its flaws. There are too many people who have suffered too long to see yet another chance for real change be squandered by compromise. If these weak changes are locked in place by a court order lasting 5 years, the community will unfairly suffer. We urge you to step back and make more changes before accepting this agreement. And so I will also add that the agreement guts the existing Community Police Relations Committee of the Human Rights Commission, which is creating a program to educate officers on institutional racism. And instead, it's in creating a new oversight body specific to the agreement, and for the second time in just a few years, pitting one set of oppressed Portlanders, that is people with mental health issues, against another, the people of color that a CPRC is trying to help currently. We also echo the concern that the COCL does not have enough power because they can't go before the federal court. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Well, the next panel is coming up. I would like to see the racial profiling work of the CPRC continue, and so that's not something that's in this agreement or outside this agreement, so that's my own personal point of view. Next four.
Are Debbie Iona, Mark Kramer, Kyle Busey, and Alan Lazo.
Okay. Mark Kramer is not here.
Thank you. Let's go with Dr. Frankel.
Ms. Iona, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm Debbie Iona, representing the League of Women Voters of Portland. We submitted a detailed letter, and I will touch on a few items from it today. The complaint system ensures officer accountability and supervision and helps maintain good community relations. Our Citizen Review Committee is an important element of Portland's system. Over the years, the community has recommended that its role be strengthened. Instead, the agreement fails to address the most troublesome issues and creates a degree of uncertainty around others. The reasonable person standard of review used at CRC appeal hearings is overly deferential. An independent expert, a city-appointed committee, and the CRC itself have recommended changing it, and we urge that the agreement incorporate a less deferential standard. At appeal hearings of misconduct cases, CRC has the authority to request that Internal Affairs conduct more investigation if needed. IA is under no obligation to do so, and City Code does not provide clarity on how to resolve the impasse. The letter of agreement gives CRC the right to make one request for additional investigation, but it is not clear about what that means or if IA is required to comply. The confusion and wrangling that occurred during appeal hearings in the presence of the complainant and the public over this and the standard of review only serve to erode trust in the system. It is unrealistic to ask the CRC to complete the entire appeal process in 21 days. The CRC members are volunteers, and each appeal hearing requires substantial preparation and considerable deliberation at both the case file review and the full hearing. A more realistic timeline should be established. In the spirit of making the system more accessible for the complainant, they should have the right to attend the Police Review Board hearing related to their case. Survivors or the families of those involved in shootings or deaths in custody cases should have the right to appeal their findings to the CRC. The Community Outreach Advisory Board will oversee the implementation of the agreement and replaces the existing Community Police Relations Committee. CPRC's efforts to address institutional racism within the Bureau and its responsibility to analyze stop data for evidence of bias-based policing need to continue. In its letter of findings, the DOJ pointed to a number of deficiencies in Bureau policies and training. There should be greater involvement by the community in development of those policies. Draft directives could be presented at monthly CRC meetings with an opportunity for public comment. Chief Reese could post draft policy changes online, as he recently did. Or perhaps the COAB is the appropriate venue. Regardless of how it is accomplished, the public must have input in policy development and training practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, good afternoon.
Can you get close to that mic? That seems to be a weak mic.
Sure, how's that?
That's better. Thank
All right. My name's Kyle Bussey. I am a Portland resident and chair-elect of the Portland Human Rights Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As a member of the Portland community and someone who served on the Human Rights Commission for over a year and a half, I commend any effort to effect positive change regarding human and civil rights in the city of Portland, including the efforts being made by the city and the DOJ to address the rights of persons with mental illness, as we're doing here. I believe it's imperative, however, that this agreement is carefully crafted to ensure community engagement and oversight by persons from the mental health community, and that the agreement does not eliminate efforts currently underway to improve police relations with our diverse communities. My initial concern about the agreement as written regards the Community and Police Relations Committee. As you know, the CPRC is an ongoing committee of the Human Rights Commission, which began as an outgrowth of the city's efforts to address racial profiling and, more generally, the Police Bureau's relationship with communities of color. Many of the challenges that existed in 2007 when the Racial Profiling Committee was created, and in 2009 when the plan to address racial profiling was drafted, continue today. And the HRC is committed to continuing the work of the CPRC with a focus on implementing the plan to address racial profiling and assisting the Police Bureau with developing its training on institutional racism. That work is jeopardized by the agreement as written. The agreement dissolves the CPRC and, at the very least, interrupts indefinitely the current work of the CPRC related to addressing the challenges I just described. There is nothing in the agreement that charges the COAB with continuing the work of the CPRC or that even refers to issues related to PPB relations with communities of color. Finally, the work of the COAB is going to be so monopolized by the task of overseeing implementation of the agreement that it is highly likely that any efforts beyond that goal will be marginalized or ignored altogether. Ultimately, CPRC's important work related to the PPB's relationship with our communities of color is too important to lose. I am not confident that this work can continue in any effective way if this agreement is approved as written. In addition to those concerns, I am also concerned that the agreement as written contains no provision to ensure that the COAB will include anyone from the mental health community. Moreover, the agreement does not provide for the participation of any non-PPB affiliated use of force experts. The oversight of an agreement that is almost exclusively focused on use of force policies as they apply to persons suffering from mental illness should contain specific provisions requiring the participation of experts in those fields. We believe these issues can be addressed given more time, and we encourage you to take the time to get this right.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Alan Lazo. I am the outgoing chair of the Human Rights Commission as of yesterday.
Thank you for your service.
I appreciate the opportunity. This is probably the third or fourth time I've been before council. I think every time I've told you that I have been a resident of Portland for 43 years, as of yesterday, my birthday. And as a resident of that length of time, this is a watershed moment in community and police relations. And we need to get it right. We absolutely need to get it right. We strongly support the concept of a robust community engagement system. However, not having been a party to the confidential processes that developed this agreement, we are concerned, as Kyle said, about the progress that the CPRC has made and what would happen to it if it morphed into the COAB. The proposed community engagement process, as the DOJ asserts in its September 13th findings, will require persistent, continuing commitment to inclusion and transparency, as well as effective structures to facilitate continuing dialogue. We believe the changes proposed to the CPRC system is in need of a few more transparent conversations with community stakeholders to ensure that the proposed processes address all of the community's concerns. We just really need more time to make sure we get this right. And I don't think 1 week to do that, if we vote next week, is going to give us that appropriate amount of time. I'll go through a couple of specific elements that I think
point out the need for us to continue to look at how this agreement is formed, how the process is formed, how the system is formed. So, for instance, in the current agreement, Section 9, Paragraph 143, the reporting structure has the COAB reporting. Oh, I'm sorry. It currently has the COAB reporting to the COCL and chaired by the COCL. I don't believe that is an appropriate reporting structure for that. The COCL is an individual, as we've heard this afternoon, who will be selected by this body and reports to this body. If you truly want to have a body that is a community engagement body, it should be chaired at a minimum by one of the community members, HRC members, or other, rather than the COCL, who is a person who is essentially a city employee and your employee. Also, in paragraph 145, as Kyle pointed out, small c through F give the charge for the COAB, but there is nothing explicit around its charge to address the tensions around the communities of color that were pointed out in the original findings letter by the DOJ. So that part has been lost in that translation. And in some of the other issues, for instance, in paragraph 142, we talk about the length of terms for COAB members, and I think there needs to be consideration for how long it will take community members and others to come to speed on these very complex systems and processes related to police work. To me, I've been on several boards that are technical in nature. It takes you maybe a good year to get up to speed. You're suggesting terms of 2 years here with 1 year reappointments. I would suggest we might need time more like 3 years. So those are the kinds of conversations we need to have as a community to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question for the Human Rights Commissioners. When is your next meeting?
Next Wednesday.
So you haven't, as a body, had a chance to look at this proposal since it just came out last Friday?
Not collectively, no.
And do you know which of the members, how many of the members of the Community and Police Relations Committee are willing to serve in the role that has been identified for them in this document?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for them, but I certainly think that it was a surprise to them to learn that they were being uprooted from their current work on the CPRC and placed into a position that they knew nothing about previous to last Thursday.
So do you think, given another week, you'll be meeting on Wednesday, and you might have a proposal for us that the Human Rights Commission would be willing to embrace with regards to the makeup of the committee?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Doctor, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Adams. Thank you, Commissioner Leonard, Commissioner Fritz, Commissioner Fish, for giving all of us the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Herman Frankel. I lived and worked together with my wife Ruth in Portland since 1965. You'll remember I was one of the people who spoke at Jefferson High School at the Portland City Council meeting when the Human Rights Commission was established. In fact, initially to your consternation, some of you, but perhaps to your delight afterwards, it was I who led the audience in singing, "For all human beings." You might remember that. I'm here today to call upon you to address serious concerns regarding the proposed agreement between the City of Portland and the U.S. Department of Justice. I share the worry voiced by Portland Copwatch members and board and by others who have testified today that the proposed agreement that's designed to change the way Portland Police Bureau provides service to the community would, at the same time that it implements some welcome changes, leave some important issues resolved. In the print testimony that you have in your hands and that I understand will be posted on the city's website, there are 15 areas of profound concern. One of them, as has been noted, is the fact that the proposed agreement would gut the existing Community Police Relations Committee of the Human Rights Commission, which is currently creating a program to educate officers on institutional racism. And the agreement would instead create an oversight body specific to the agreement, devoid of any mission to deal with race issues. This worries me profoundly. And I'm worried as well by about the 14 other concerns that are listed in the print testimony that I've submitted to you. I fervently call upon the members of my city council to address thoughtfully the concerns that have been raised to you today and prior to today regarding the proposed agreement before you move forward to approve the proposed agreement. Thank you again for the chance to testify.
Doctor. Thank you all for your testimony. All right, the next four
are Michael Mio, Fred Bryant, Dr. T. Allen Bethel, and Sylvia Zingasser.
Who was the first person?
Michael Mio, M-E-O, sorry.
Welcome back to the City Council. Would you like to begin?
14.
What's that, Carla? Oh, 14 more? Okay. Hi, welcome.
Hello, Mayor Adams, and this is my second appearance before the City Council. Commissioner Fritz and Commissioner Fish. I am Michael Mayo, and I am a secretary of the Cascadia chapter of the Pacific Green Party. I am also a member of CopWatch, but I am here as a citizen, just not representing either of those two bodies. I'd like to speak in as concise a manner as I can. Short sentences, simple thoughts. I don't have at my fingertips details and the many pages and paragraphs of the agreement. I will say that from my perspective, the problem is that of police accountability. And we are sitting here because there has been a lack of police accountability in our city. There are a lot of distractions that pull us away from this major point of a lack of police accountability over decades in our city. Among the distractions from my perspective, again, have to do with what is the color of the police officer's skin or the color of the person who has been brutalized. And I consider those distractions, and I would like to point out, education is not the same thing as accountability. We had a Department of Justice investigation, and that was in one way a very good thing because this Department of Justice investigation concluded that there has been a pattern of brutality within our police. And that which we community members have been saying for years, decades, is now given the approval, the assertion of the federal government. However, that same investigation has produced a failure. It is a failure, again, of keeping the eye on the ball because we're talking about a lack of police accountability. It's not just Portland alone that is looking at this, however. The problem is large. Our police chief told us that we're having fewer people locked up. We're having a lower crime rate. Yet the United States is more militarized on many levels as a result of many other things. We lock up something like 3.5 out of every 10 people in the world. What we want is a truly independent police review board, and this agreement doesn't give it. We also want the mayor and the city council to do what it has done with the Frashauer case and fire police officers who kill citizens.
Thank you, sir. Hi, welcome.
Hi. Hello to Commissioner and Mayor Adams. Good to see you again. My name is Fred Bryant.
father of Keaton notice. Because anyone else whose case was investigated and assigned findings other than sustained has a right to appeal those findings to the CRC. Myself feel denied of my request for an appeal is fundamentally unfair. And I want to secure the right for myself and anyone else who has lost a loved one, or for that matter, survived a police shooting, to appeal findings that almost exclusively clears all wrongful doing. And I've listened to everything that's been said today. And this is a time for us to come together. You know, it's like, I have no problem with wrong and right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. I work in the community. I've been here 52 years. Okay. I have 11 grandchildren. This is not about what's going to happen today. It's about what's going to happen in 20 years. What are we going to have in 20 years for our grandchildren, for our kids and their kids? What are we leaving them? You know what I'm saying? Because we're going to be gone. I work in the community with mental health, addiction. Mayor Adams has been to our new building. He sees the work we've done over decades to help people in the community get back in life. Everybody needs the opportunity to be able to better themselves, and that's what we do. Mr. Salzman, you know, was part of us getting this building over on MLK. Now, I know for a fact that if you believe that we're doing a good job, and you must have been, because that building was $12 million. I didn't have it in my pocket, okay, but it's there, and we help the community. I, myself, have relationships with the Portland Police Bureau. I have friends that I talk to, officers at North Precinct, Northeast Precinct, chiefs. You know, they have a meeting, a monthly meeting at our building. So this is not about, you know, who's wrong or right. It's about, let's try to get it together. Okay. Bottom line, you know, you know, all these big words, I don't get them. I like to keep it real simple. If it's wrong, fix it. Bottom line, let's not twist it all up, try to make it better for one person than another person, and be like crabs in a barrel. See, that's what I tell my people that come in that want help getting back. You want to know how to stay out of jail? Stop doing what you're doing. Because if you do what you do, you're going to jail. Bottom line, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. Hi, welcome back.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Zinga, sir, NAMI Multnomah advocate, and I'd like to respond for NAMI families, so I have a letter I'd like to read. NAMI family members' statement. As we have done previously, NAMI family members advocate for Portland volunteer CIT police officers to use the Memphis, Tennessee model. NAMI family members want to know these officers as well as interact with them. NAMI family members want family members and peers to be a part of the training process so the volunteer officers hear directly from family members and peers face to face. It is important for officers to get to know the family member's ill relative when they are not in crisis. We believe Portland Police needs an A-team, a first-tier response team of volunteer officers who receive extended CIT, and that they become the experts in dealing with mental health crisis on the street. We believe all officers should be trained in CIT because an A-team, a first-tier team may not be available at all times. Officers are like emergency room doctors and nurses. They have to take things as they come in and are held accountable for their on-the-spot decisions. In my opinion, any officer who doesn't want to respond to a mental health crisis, call, or a family beef is in the wrong job. A lot of bad guys have mental illnesses too, and it's difficult to separate that out in the heat of a call. My son stated recently, because of his own experience during one of his suicide attempts several years ago, that police officers need to get over treating people like they are guilty until proven innocent. The law says innocent until proven guilty. It happens to be my son's birthday, by the way. He's 48. In closing, I do want to commend the officers who assisted my son's recent suicide attempt. My husband, William Summerlight, and I were on the scene. The officers' approach was CIT perfect, and for that we are very grateful. The officers did not know my involvement with NAMI or that I was a member of the CIT Advisory Board. Thank you, Mayor Adams and Commissioners.
Well, thank you. I know you worked with Commissioner Fritz through all the Safer PDX and that. Her efforts with yours stood us well in the part of this agreement that has the fast tracking of the healthcare reforms, the CCO reforms. So thank you for your involvement.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Doctor, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to all of our commissioners. Good to see you again. First of all, I want to thank you for your work in this matter, working with the Department of Justice and your due diligence in working towards this agreement. This is a moment that we may never have again, but it is a great moment at this time that we have to take a giant step towards making our community more livable and towards community policing. Just a few fundamental questions that I have of thought. You've heard many of the suggestions and recommendations, and we do echo our support and sentiment for those. But the committee's composition that we are proposing in this agreement is to take one committee that at best has not been effective and suggest now that that committee can do the job now. That it is best to continue with the current leadership, again, if that could be done and it could do it, then why has it not been done? And why has it brought us to the place where we are, where we had to have a DOJ investigation to say what we've been saying over and over and over again? Transparency builds trust. And in this case, trust has been further eroded by the process undertaken that seems to only reinforce things already in place, leaving this community in a situation to endure 5 more years of unclarity and being subject to interpretation based on individuals. This agreement needs to be relooked at, renegotiated, and it needs to come back with teeth. It needs to come back with the grip of authority to hold accountable the Police Bureau. I urge you all to take a look and read through the document again. DOJ said community involvement. Where was the community when the doors were closed? Where was the community, again, when we were invited to be a part of the Police Bureau's negotiation for a contract, that they take it behind closed doors and then the agreement comes out? We're tired of closed doors and things being jammed down our throats. We want you, our elected officials, to stand up, say to the city attorney, say to the chief of police, Mr. Commissioner, what you have done thus far is not acceptable. It is not good for our community, and we want to strengthen what is going to be so that in our future we will have a better community, better relationships with our police bureau, and we all can get together. If we would have included community from the beginning, perhaps those of us who are here saying redo would be here saying thumbs up and good job. Don't forget us even at this time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doctor. Because we've been going on now for however many hours, we're going to take a 8-minute break. So we'll see you back here at 4:04. Council will come back to order. Carla, can you please call, how many do we have, how many folks do we have left to testify? 13? All right. So can you call the next four?
Next four are Joanne Hardesty, Donita Fry, Angela Kimball, and Ann Brayfield.
Welcome back, Ms. Hardesty. And we got to turn on your mic first.
Hold on.
Oh, do I need a mic?
Most days, no, but we
Days,
want
no.
the public television to hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. For the record, I'm Joanne Hardesty, and I live and work in Portland. And I want to start my testimony, Mayor, by correcting a statement you made in your opening remarks. The statement that you made that the DOJ didn't find racism within the Portland Police Bureau is an inaccurate statement. In fact, the investigation says that that was not part of their investigation. So it's not that they didn't find it, they didn't look for it. I also wanted to reiterate some words that I heard from the attorney that said the words of the agreement are the only things that will count in holding the Portland Police accountable. And I think that that's very important. I've submitted to all of you a 6-page letter that I will not read here, but I will highlight for you some of my concerns. And I know, Mayor, you and your staff worked very hard on this agreement, and I respect the work that you've done. My major concern is the community oversight of this process. As the DOJ stated, the community participation and oversight of this agreement will be important to its success. It also laid out that the body will also provide the community with information on this agreement, implementation, and receiving comments and concern. The proposal to put together this community outreach and advisory board, I disagree with the arrangement that's been proposed. And I disagree with it because I want to be honest with you. Ever since the DOJ has come to town, and even before they came, we have never heard from the Portland Police that they have done anything wrong. So it's really hard to go into mandated reform efforts if you've never done anything wrong. And so my concern is that if we take advisory bodies that already have been vetted by the police and the city council, and they have been found to be acceptable to the police, they're acceptable to the police because they don't raise the hard questions. They don't challenge them. They don't hold them accountable for the information that they provide. What we need is a process whereby the community would get to elect their own leadership for this oversight council, and we need to take out the word advisory. They're not advisory. Their job is to make sure that the mandated changes happen, and they need to be able to do that without the perception that they're providing advice to the police chief. We have a fundamental responsibility, especially for the commissioners that will come back next year, because you are investing $26 million in basically a full employment program for Portland police officers. $26 million is what this contract will cost us, both short-term and long-term, and it is not sufficiently, it does not have a sufficient oversight process in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hardesty. Appreciate it, and appreciated your letter, and we will, and everyone who submitted longer testimony, we will definitely all be reading those and getting back to you. Appreciate it. Hi, welcome, Commissioner.
Zangu Yetchabayaku. Good afternoon, Mayor Adams, City Council. My name is Donita Fry, and I'm a member of the Human Rights Commission, and I have been for the past 4 years. I was appointed by the Human Rights Commission last month to chair the work of the Community Police Relations Committee. I've been participating in that work for more than 3 years now. The work that we've been doing and the relationships that have resulted at the CPRC are authentic, respectful, and productive. The relationships between the Human Rights Commission, the police, and the community are authentic. I believe that the working model that has been created is effective because of the commitment from the command staff at Portland Police Bureau. Also because of the learning opportunities that have been created over the past 3 years, we are able to come with informed perspectives that are woven into our decisions and our actions that are coming out of the work of the CPRC. And I've heard Commander Krebs, Assistant Chief O'Day, and Chief Reese comment many times on the ability and the uniqueness of the relationships that are produced here. For this committee not to be a yes group, we don't just affirm what the police are doing. We ask those difficult questions and we push back. And really, I've seen shift in the culture of not only the way this committee works together, but the way the police officers coming to the work participate, and the community. Not only the community who serve on the committee, but the community who are here in the rooms today that come to these meetings and gain a deeper understanding. I think there's a perception in the community about how the police operate and what the police are doing. And then there's a reality of the parameters from which they operate and what they are doing. And together this committee has created space for us to grow in learning around those perceptions and the actual work. The work that we've been doing is relative to some of the findings that have come out of the report from DOJ in respect to the use of force and into community engagement and outreach. We also have crossover from our work on race and racial profiling that crosses over into the mental health areas. However, we don't have any mental health experts or expertise on our committee. So given our experience and expertise of work, the Human Rights Commission and the CPRC are encouraged to move forward with the work of the COAB. I think this comes from the fact that the Human Rights Commission has not met since the announcement came out last week, nor has the Community Police Relations Committee, and I cannot speak on behalf of any of those participants at this time, but moving forward is a good idea, but we are a volunteer commission, and the human rights commissioners that engage in the human rights work, the CPRC work, that's just another level of consideration that should be given more thought in the settlement agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your service. I know you're working on a lot of different fronts. Appreciate it. Hi, welcome.
Hello, Mayor Adams and Commissioners. I am Angela Kimball. I'm with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I'm here today as the mother of an adult child who lives with a mental health diagnosis. And I want to commend the City of Portland and the U.S. Department of Justice for working collaboratively to address issues that have contributed to the many tragic encounters between people who live with mental illness and our city's police officers. But at the same time, I'm here to ask that all of you, as our city's leaders, commit to providing the strong leadership and the sustained oversight needed to ensure that Portland becomes a city where the community and its police bureau work together to protect the health and well-being of all of its residents, including those who live with mental illness. In short, like many others, I'm here today to ask for your leadership in changing the culture of our police bureau. And a change in the police bureau culture is important because today, Portlanders fear rather than trust how many of our police will deal with how someone who is affected by mental illness will be dealt with. As an advocate, I've heard many stories, but one that truly haunts me is from my fellow mother who lives in the West Hills. She has a grown son whose mind is affected by schizophrenia. The paranoia that is a common symptom of her son's diagnosis leads him to think that his mother, is the devil, rather than the person who loves him most in this world. He refuses any help from her, and ill and impoverished, he's homeless and he's in and out of our jails. But rather than counting on our city's police to protect and reach out to her son, she reads the papers every day, fearing that her son will be the next victim, the next James Chassie, the next Keaton Otis. No mother in our city should live with that fear. Portland can do better. The proposed settlement agreement outlines multiple actions that could well help the City of Portland and the Portland Police Bureau save lives and protect residents who live with mental health conditions. One such action is return to the voluntary Memphis model of crisis intervention teams. To implement this successfully, the city should hire a national consultant with expertise in this model, such as Sam Cochran of Memphis, Tennessee, the home of CIT. But the promise of a Portland where people trust the police to protect all of its residents, especially those who live with mental illness, cannot be decreed by a legal document, nor can it be guaranteed by a budget. It will come only with your collective commitment to bring the culture of the police bureau in sync with the mores of your electorate. As our city's leaders, this means holding the Portland Police Bureau accountable not to the letter of the law, but to reflecting the true spirit of our beloved city. As just one of many thousands of Portlanders whose family is affected by mental health challenges, I hope we can count on you to demonstrate that leadership and dedication. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
You can move that mic so you don't have to. There you go.
Thank you. Mayor and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. I'm heartened by the work that has been done to date on this agreement, but I would agree with many who've spoken before me that we have more work to do to make this a workable solution to a long, long time problem that we've had in the city of Portland. And we've done lots of studying. We've learned lots of things over many, 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 many years. Sometimes we implement things, sometimes they go away. This one really needs to happen, and it needs to happen in the strongest way, and it needs to happen with the trust and the support of our community. I was very happy to see the Memphis model come up. I've been before you before asking for that consideration. And I'm glad to hear Angela mention Sam Cochran and think about the possibility of having him come here so that we're not, again, relying on ourselves to reinvent what has been very successfully ongoing in Memphis for many, many years. And as far as the COCL being someone appointed by council, responsible to council, I think we've got to take another look at that. Sam, you had asked about other cities that might have a court-appointed monitor. Yesterday's Oregonian, there was a short story on Seattle. They have a court-appointed monitor. The gal from the ACLU handed me a list of other cities that have them: New Orleans, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Los Angeles. Let's not try to do it our way. Let's do it in a way that others have stepped up to so that we can have some independence, so that we can have more support and more trust from our community. I think that's where we need to be. I think the most important thing we can do now is to really work together as a community with you as leaders, with other members of your teams, but with the community. We have to get together, and we have to have open doors, and we have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Could you give us your name, please?
Oh, sorry, Ann Brayfield, Southwest Portland.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Next four
are Jan Campbell, Shannon Pullen, Joseph Gordon, and Bill DiNardo.
Welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for your perseverance. Would you like to begin? Go ahead.
My name is Shannon Pullen, and I'm the Interim Executive Director for NAMI Multnomah. I also happen to love two people who live with serious mental health issues. I just want to thank Mayor Adams and the commissioners, especially Amanda Fritz, for all of her support of our work, and really to thank Chief Reese. We had the privilege of meeting with him September 29th and expressing the having a public forum for family members to speak with Chief Reese. And I actually just want to share a few paragraphs from the letter that we submitted to Chief Reese. NAMI families want a specialized CIT team that is voluntary and receives additional training to serve as first responders when 911/crisis line mental health crisis calls come in, as well as to be available for officers to call for assistance. We believe all officers should continue to be trained in CIT since any officer may encounter someone in crisis. We want all officers to be proficient in their use of CIT. And we also want yearly refresher courses scheduled like the yearly tactical requirements. We understand having a voluntary additional trained CIT team impacts police staffing and keeping officers on the street. We believe its implementation could actually strengthen the city budget by reducing the number of lawsuits paid out when police encounters cause loss of life or serious injury. We're also concerned, and that's not in this letter, but as an aside, we're concerned that the funding of this settlement will come at the cost of funding social services that are specifically designed to keep people living with mental illness from experiencing a mental health crisis that would potentially necessitate an interaction with the police in the first place. NAMI family members would like to see crisis intervention training incorporate working directly with peers and family members, and that's happened previously. We believe this will enhance officers' training as to better understand what mentally ill people are challenged with. Seeing peers not in crisis creates a very meaningful response from officers. It opens their eyes that these are real people with real feelings. And hearing from family members and their experience dealing with the police in a crisis situation further educates police to the human side of their work. And again, as an aside, studies have shown that the way to reduce stigma around mental illness is not particularly just around education, but about getting to know people. And I think that police officers need to see people living with serious mental illness who are living in recovery and who are doing well. NAMI family members and peers are extremely concerned about officers giving commands that people in mental health crisis cannot follow. If you have a cognitive processing disorder, you might be slow to react. You might not want to be touched. You might have other physical illnesses or disabilities that get in the way of enabling people to move quickly. And I'll shorten my remarks here because I see that I'm running out of time. But in regards to the settlement, NAMI would like to see peers and family members on any kind of oversight committee, whatever form that takes. And that we might not be trained mental health professionals, but we are experts in our personal and lived experience with mental illness and have a lot to offer the community in that regard. We would like to extend a real partnership on behalf of our members and NAMI as an organization to the city and to the Police Bureau. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work.
And could you make sure you submit your written testimony, the whole thing?
I will.
Thank you.
Ms. Campbell, welcome back.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm Jan Campbell, and I'm a commissioner on the Commission on Disability. And before I speak on the issue, I just want to thank you, Mayor Adams and Commissioner Leonard, for all your support on disability issues. We've worked together for a long time, and this is kind of a sad moment for me because I know the two of you will be leaving. And we haven't always agreed, but your doors have always been open, at least for me, and I know others in the community. So I want to thank you very much.
You remember, he gets to retire and collect a pension. I just get to retire.
And
it's sadder for me.
And I hopefully will continue to be able to work with both you commissioners on the council in the future. So thank you very much. The focus of the DOJ report was specific to a review of excessive force used on persons experiencing and living with mental illness. The settlement agreement described Community Oversight Advisory Board has no strategic method to ensure representation of people with expertise or interest in mental health issues. The Portland Commission on Disability is engaged to represent a wide spectrum of disabilities on behalf of the residents of the City of Portland and to facilitate increased collaboration and information exchange between persons with disabilities. City bureaus and City Council. It was not consulted in any way on this settlement agreement. The agreement specifies that the current members of the Community and Police Relations Committee, CPRC, become the HRC members to work on the COAB. The Commission on Disability sees that it is disrespectful to people who experience mental illness to ask them to agree to have others acting in their name. We request to change having the 5 members of the CPRC on the COAB to 5 members selected in collaboration between the Portland Commission on Disability and the Human Rights Commission. We see the value of the CPRC continuing its vital work. Stopping work on racial profiling is what leaders in communities of color feared would happen when the DOJ focus went into mental health. It should not be either or. We need both. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Hi, welcome.
Hello. I'm Joseph Gordon, a.k.a. Tequila of Occupy Portland. I'm speaking just on behalf of myself. A year ago, before I'm speaking for my significant other, a year ago before we got together, my significant other, he took $8.75 worth of sandwiches at Fred Meyer's, if I'm not believed. He was approached by the police. They followed him, and basically, when they told him to stop, he threw the sandwiches at the police car, and he ended up tased, and his teeth was bashed in the front. What they don't know is he was born with fetal alcohol syndrome. He has brain damage, and also, like most people with FASD, he fell into a line of drugs. At that time, he was recovered, and soon after, his teeth was bashed. He found himself back onto drugs, and just kept on ramping about the police. And I didn't know about fetal alcohol syndrome or disorder or anything. But when a recent incident just happened, and I actually picked up a book and read about fetal alcohol syndrome, and it said it all. They resist arrest, they run from authority, hypertension, everything else, and basically, he found what I've seen since we've been together. He stopped using drugs. He started protesting. I mean, he was so positive, and then another incident happened where, I'll be honest, 2 of the police was very nice and approached him just well. But the one who he claimed, I don't know, he claims that he was the one who tased him. He was very nasty. I mean, I even said that I know that must be the guy. And basically, he resisted arrest off of a trespass 2 ticket and ended up to be resisting arrest assault of a peace officer and everything else. And I mean, I'm glad that, something's being done finally. And I was uneducated about it until my recent episode with it. And I picked up a book and I read it. And pretty much that I just appreciate that the city is actually tackling on this problem. And I just hope that, people with fetal alcohol syndrome, 60% of them are in jail or in prison. And it don't help them, impulsive behavior and everything. I just hope the city can work with also the judicial system as well about this problem, because prison or anything ain't going to help. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for, I know it's a difficult thing to come to City Council and testify about. Thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate it. Sir.
Bill Donardo, Portland North, participated in the Portland North Safety Action Committee for the last 3 to 4 years. I've lived in Portland for the last 22 years. Grew up in the south side of Chicago, the inner city, where a lot of my friends a long time ago were either dead or they're in jail. But I just want to comment about the Portland Safety Action Committee, what they do throughout the city with Clay Neal, with Chief Reese. You've been there a few times, a couple of times anyway, to talk. I have to tell you, if we had the communication back where I grew up, we wouldn't have even 1/4 the problems that we have back there now, as I go back to visit relatives. So I just came to comment, keep communicating. It was mentioned earlier by a gentleman, people do wrong, people do right. We have to look at the safety of the public of the city of Portland. Of all the major cities in the country, this is the greatest city in the country by no means. It's wonderful. So just keep up the good work and just keep communicating. There are good and bad with everything. You try to attain a zero defect policy when you meet, and just keep continuing to do that. Nothing will be perfect, ever. When you have people that have to go to work and carry a weapon, I have to admit I have to admire those people, because I admire people who do things that I could never do. So I just wanted to make that comment. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Next 4.
We have 6 people left, and 4 want to stay together. So if I could take the 2 of them right now, Woody Broadnax and James Kalia, I believe is the last name.
Mr. Broadnax, welcome back.
Morning. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good. Please begin.
You know, I've been listening to a lot of the testimony that's been going on today, and my major concern is that the City Council thinks smartly about what is being suggested and what is being proposed. When I think of global warming and the fact that we are experiencing many disasters on the East Coast, one picture comes to mind, and that is the crane. This particular crane has a piece that's dangling from it. And a lot of the individuals, construction people, engineers were saying, well, we could send a crew up there, and they can go up there and fix the crane and pull it back to one piece. That was an unreasonable belief, as they discovered that the only way that they're going to be able to secure that crane is to secure it to the building. That was a suggestion. But what I'm saying is that we need to do the right thing first and not use the ability to save costs and et cetera, and do what we normally have been doing. So the final suggestion from these people were, we will build another crane right next to that crane, and then we'll be able to get the piece that's dangling from it. And I think that that's the best thing that we can possibly do today. As we sit here and look at the DOJ and the fact that it doesn't answer all of our interests, it needs to be thought out smartly. We need to build a new crane and be able to attach what has been failing and be able to secure that piece that is dropping off. And I think that everything that I've heard this morning, that analogy comes to my mind. We need to think smartly. And that's what I want to urge. And I appreciate any effort, because I firmly believe, and I've said this before, everyone in the United States of America has got a mental health issue. And it's incumbent upon us to be able to put it in a position where we're able to bring them back to sanity. And this is our opportunity as a city, and really it's our opportunity as a nation. My name is Woodrow Broadnax. I'm a congressional candidate for District 3, running in the 2012 elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Okay, my name is James Kahn, and I'm a private citizen representing only myself. I come to this with a little bit of experience. I'm a policy analyst, and I've studied public safety, command and control, and consensus development. When I was living in California, I was a licensed psychologist. Since I came to Portland, I've served on Commissioner Leonard's commission on the IPR, and I served with Commissioner Fritz on the PDX steering committee, and you did a wonderful job. I really thank you. And for the past several years, I've been serving on the CIT Advisory Board. When the Department of Justice recommendations came down, I had a mixed reaction. I really liked those recommendations, and I think it's great that the city is going to make a big step to implement them. On the other hand, we'd been making them at the CIT Advisory Board for years, and we'd been ignored. So it was sort of frustrating to see that, hey, wow. And I don't blame Chief Reese for this. Once the word got up to Chief Reese about what we were talking about, although he had to be hit over the head with the DOJ hammer, he got the message. And he's been meeting with us, and I have full confidence that he can go ahead. To the topic of the agreement here, one of the principal items on that agreement was more community involvement. And I think I have to say, with all due respect, in creating the agreement, you have violated one of the strong recommendations of the DOJ that there was inadequate community involvement, and the evidence from that is what you've heard here today. There are enough people who have an honest stake who haven't been heard. Now, I'm not recommending that we have 800 people meet with the DOJ to figure out what's happening, but it would have been really nice if we had some assurance that in the negotiations, those people who had the negotiation role could say, we've talked with this element of the community and this is what they want, and we've talked with that element of the community and this is what they want, and as we represent the community, these are the things that need to be done, and go at it that way. I think that basically, I think the bottom line is this agreement is not yet ready for prime time and should be rethought, and it is such an opportunity to do something right and major change that it's worth taking a little bit of extra time to make sure you get it really right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. All right, last four.
Who signed up were Evelyn Murray, Lisa Haynes, Jamie McCullen, and Tequila Baker.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience and perseverance.
You know, they always save the best for last.
That's right. The best for last. Who would like to begin?
My name is Evelyn Murray, and I'm a former president of the Oregon Human Rights Coalition back in the 80s when we kicked butt and we made changes for the welfare reform, not just for the state of Oregon, but the welfare reform for the United States of America picked up our work that we did. I'm now president of Family Nurturing and Caring for Family. We work with the Governor's Task Force, well, in a way against the Governor's Task Force, but for it, because we do look at the racial disparity and the racial disproportionality that is presented with children that are in foster care, who come out of the foster care system, have been medically treated for so many years. And if they can't find their families, they age out on the streets. So now you have a population, a young population of people who are emotionally delayed, mentally delayed. The most dangerous part is that when they age out on the state stops providing them their pharmaceuticals. You have a group of people that are on out on the streets that join those children that are from other parts of family or society that's bad. And now you have a group of people that are so heavily medicated seeking their drugs in the underground market, where since they were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the good old state of Oregon didn't have any problems providing them with their prescribed prescription, legal prescriptions. But when you age them out on the system, they don't have that support. The net's pulled from under them. So you're going to have these new homeless groups starting a new kind of gang that, what's his name, Michael Reese, the chief of police. It is sad that that officer had to shoot the Campbell boy. It's sad, but he did it. And what he did was murder. And you can call it whatever you want to call it. It was outright murder. One of the things I like about Mayor Adams, and I want to read a quote from Robert Kennedy. It says that few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage, Mayor Adams, is a rare commodity. It's a commodity that's braver than those that are in battle, yet it is the one essential thing that's very vital, that most of you that make those decisions at 1%, and I call you guys the gatekeeper of the 1%, they don't want to change. They want things to stay the way they are. These are the battles that you have to face, and it takes a lot of courage to stand up and do that. And the racial disproportionality and the racial disparity that is here in Oregon has been here ever since the 1844 territorial decree from the territorial governor of the Oregon territories. And that thing is still on the books. And the exclusion laws are still on the books. You have police officers that are very much aware that they got some laws that they can squeak through. As a citizen that's a taxpayer, no one can tell my chief of police what he can and cannot do, especially when he's standing up for what's right. And I spoke with him earlier about that. I don't know who that person is that gave you the order that you're going to take this murderer back into your wings. But he don't have the power. The people do. Government is of the people, by the people, for the people. And when the government is not serving the needs of the people, it is our inalienable right to bear arms and defend ourselves and execute said government. And we're standing out in parks occupying. The 1% must look out at the 99% from their high rises and laugh, because there's something wrong with the 99%. I have with me here Lisa Haynes, Taquilla Baker, and her friend Jamie, her partner Jamie. And Lisa's had to stand at TriMet in front of her African-American son that has issues because he's been raised in foster care. It took her 26 years to find him. And if she hadn't have stood in front of him, these are officers, had pulled their guns, and she would not stand down. She's a little bit taller than the mic here, okay? And she had to do that. And I'm saying, that's not making any sense. You know, this is like stuff you read about in Stephen King horror movies. And this is my daughter, Taquilla, who has mental issues, but it's issues because of the stress of society. She just can't deal with it because as a gay person, she's not supposed to be. She's not supposed to. It's not normal. And as her partner Jamie, they have the same problems. I don't support homosexuality whatsoever, but I support my daughter. I support human rights. And to continue, I know you guys got to give an answer to the feds, but the answer that you guys are about to give, like the young man that just left here, don't let them know, don't feel pressure. I call anybody over the 60 or younger, young people. Don't be under pressure to give that answer because you guys are not ready to give that answer. And I'm not going to be like most people and say, oh, I don't think. I'm telling you, you don't. You're not ready to give that answer. If you do, you're putting a Band-Aid on it. And a Band-Aid, what it's going to do, you're going to be right back here with the same committee. And
thank you. I gave you 3 more minutes.
Well, they're giving me all their minutes. I don't know if you can do that.
No.
But,
I just gave you 3 more minutes on your own.
Okay.
So they now have 3 minutes each in addition.
But you do understand that they kind of like mentally delayed, and they do need for me to speak for them, and so you're denying them advocacy?
I would never do that.
That's what you're doing.
No, I'm going to give them time now to speak as well. Well said. I appreciate it very much. Yeah. Hi. Welcome.
Hi.
Could you tell us who you are?
My name is Lisa Haynes.
Lisa, could you get just a little bit, I know Joanne wants to chair the meeting, but could you get a little bit closer?
My name is Lisa Haynes. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. As Evelyn was speaking about my son, I was here in this place, the city council room. Go ahead. 2010 was when I first moved here to Portland, Oregon. And me and my son envisioned that we would come here and make a change. My son is from here because of foster care and adoption, and through, to me, black market and the illegal adoption in America on black families and Native families. And I spoke here in the city council meeting with my son. He was sitting right beside me. And I spoke in front of everyone. I said that I prayed that this doesn't happen to me or my son would happen to Marva Davis. I said that. And less than 2 years from this month, me and my son was attacked on the Portland Max by a drunk person. And he kept falling back on me. And all my son, he knows martial arts. And he told him, he said, I know martial arts. He said, I will protect my mom, you know. And the drunk guy, he put his hands around my son's throat. And my son had every right to defend himself. Well, long story short, everyone called the cops on us. because my son handled it without injury. He knew how to he knew how to restrain someone without hurting them. And so they got away. We stayed on the max. And by the time we got off the max, no cops came or nothing. By the time we walked through the Lloyd Center Mall, over 10 cop cars came on us deep over a disturbance on the max. And they even tried to implicate my son as another a disturbance was happening at the same time. They tried to put my son in the same place at the same time, 2 different places at the same time. We were walking into the mall, and the cops rode up on us, got out of their car, started pointing their tasers and guns at us. And I got in front of my son, and I told them, I said, why are you guys after us? Y'all should be running after those guys that kept following on me on the MAX train, and disrupting the MAX. And everybody called the cops on us, and they tased my son in the throat. That's illegal, for one. They dragged me away from my son on all fours, shoved me to the ground, and threw me in the cop car on my stomach so I couldn't see them murdering my son. There was witnesses all around, but there's no evidence of videotape at the MAX because they got rid of the evidence. And they didn't give my son medical attention or anything. They dog-pounded. There was over 10 cops on top of my son. This was the TriMet that did this. And the following year, I was attacked by the same TriMet cops because we were targeted because of they probably seen us on TV speaking here at the city council, and we're also activists. I was attacked another time from the first incident by the cops, just standing on the corner of Foster and 82nd, just standing there out of the rain when 2 cops, TriMet cops, came up to me, harassed me, and asked me what was in my bag. Quite naturally, I know my rights. I didn't have to. I have a right to refuse because it's our birthright to be protected. And we're supposed to be protected by the law. That's what our tax money is for. And he didn't. And they grabbed my backpack. They forced me in handcuffs. Didn't tell me why they were there until 2 witnesses came and said that I stole some mail. At 10 o'clock in the morning, mind you. I'm going to go do something that the judge ordered me to do from the first case. When the first incident, they told me...
So, ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've got a lot of people waiting. And so what is the point you want to make sure we understand from...
That we're victims, we're citizens, we're taxpayers, we're humans. And we're being slaughtered like cows and animals in the street with no respect to humankind. And we're being attacked and racially profiled as trash and garbage, like we don't matter in this world. And I'm fed up with it. I'm a 47-year-old black woman. I'm a 47-year-old black African-American Native black woman that moved to your town, and this is the welcome that I get. I came here because I found my son after 20 plus years. I'm dealing with that too.
Thank you.
Something's got to get done.
Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it very much. Hi, welcome.
Hello. My name's Tequila Baker, but my mom calls me Tequila. But it's actually a question I think that everybody would have, but it's also a question to myself of the comparison between what Evelyn and she is speaking on. And the comparison I would like to share would be police versus DHS. If the police and DHS are in a position to protect and serve someone that calls them, then they should do so. If they also have the position to use the same laws and rules mandated to break those laws, then people in our position as a community have to fight back. But the hardest thing to do is fight someone who made these laws that are also breaking them. How do you come to a city or anywhere in the United States of America where things are governed, the president is doing his thing, but yet we as the people that elect these people still choose to turn a cheek and close their eyes as if they were born blind to what's really going on. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you for testifying. I appreciate it. Would you like to say anything? Hi.
No, my name is Jamie McKellen. I'm just here for support.
And a good supporter you are. Thanks. Appreciate you all for your testimony. That gets us to the end of the public testimony. Carla, excuse me, remind me what the main city email is for City Council. Is it citycouncil@portlandoregon.gov, or what is it?
Usually it's just sent to me, my email, you mean?
Okay. Yeah. You can, and your email is?
Carla, Karla .moore, MOORE, -love, LOVE, @portlandoregon.gov.
Or send to any of our email addresses. The record will remain open. Next week we will have another hearing. We won't be voting on this next week. Next week we'll be considering amendments to what's before the City Council. I'd ask that the City Council get to my office suggested changes and amendments based on the testimony and feedback we get over the next couple of days, and in turn we will discuss with the Department of Justice. I want to thank everyone who testified here today, and especially for those that didn't submit written testimony and didn't have time to say everything that you wanted to say. That's why we'll keep the record open, and I do appreciate your work.
Can I just get a clarification? If we're going to do a second
first reading
next week, is it your intention to do that on a time certain?
Yes.
When do you intend to do that?
We already have it scheduled, I think, for the second reading.
No. It's usually on regular agenda. If you want a time certain, it would be 9:45 a.m.
9:45.
We do it
Thursday.
on Thursday.
Oh, Thursday. Sorry.
Yeah, a week from now.
Oh boy.
Would we not vote that day?
No, we would not vote that day.
What do we have on Thursday, Carla?
It'd be 3:30 on Thursday. I can
right.
only show you out, though, Mayor. You will. I have an absence for you right now.
We'll figure that out.
Okay.
So tentatively pencil in 3:30 on Thursday.
Leonard's gone too.
And we will do our best with attendances, and we will be entertaining any changes. Again, if folks would get us changes before Tuesday, that gives us time to sit down with the Department of Justice. Thank you all very much. This conversation will continue.